The twin suns of Artemis Prime hung low in the sky, casting golden-orange light over the towering palace spires. The air shimmered with heat, yet inside the palace walls, the grand halls remained cool, protected by energy shields and ancient climate controls that had kept the royal family comfortable for centuries. Queen Solara walked slowly through the corridors, her long robes brushing against the marble floors. Every step echoed through the palace, carrying with it the weight of years of grief. A decade had passed since her daughter, Princess Lyra, had disappeared. The loss had hollowed her, left a shadow over the once vibrant queen who had ruled Artemis Prime with elegance and authority. The memory of that day remained sharp in her mind. She had been called to the observation deck during the final preparations for the planetary gala, a celebration meant to honor the alliance between human colonies and Artemis Prime. Lyra had been laughing, her silver hair catching the light like strands of moonlight. Then, without warning, a sudden breach in the energy shields had allowed a Xipherian raiding party to strike. Chaos had erupted. Guards had fallen, alarms had blared, and in the confusion, Lyra had been swept away. Despite every search, every probe, and every expedition sent beyond the stars, she was never found. Everyone mourned her as dead. Queen Solara had ruled alone, her heart carrying a void no coronation, no victory, no ceremony could fill. She paused before the large panoramic window overlooking the palace gardens, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the glass. Outside, the flora of Artemis Prime glowed under the twin suns, their colors strange but beautiful. Purple vines climbing sapphire trees, silver-leafed bushes swaying in the warm breeze. Birds with translucent wings flitted between the branches. Despite its beauty, the queen felt no peace. She had longed for her daughter every day, wondering if somewhere in the vastness of space, Lyra survived, alone and afraid. Yet each passing year had made hope seem a foolish thing, a dream too fragile for a ruler to entertain. The silence of the palace was broken suddenly by the faint hum of gravlifts arriving at the main gates. The queen straightened instinctively, sensing something unusual. The palace was secure, all arrivals were usually announced and escorted. This hum was different, softer, almost hesitant, like someone who did not belong. Her advisors moved toward the gates, their robes rustling, voices murmuring low warnings about potential intruders. Solara's eyes narrowed. She had long ago trained herself to read subtle changes in the air, the vibrations of the palace, the nuances of movement. Something was coming that she had not expected. Moments later, the gates opened, revealing a small figure being carried in the arms of a man. The figure was young, her movements slight and controlled despite being held. Her silver hair shimmered in the sunlight, flowing like a river of light down her back. Her eyes, violet and striking, scanned the palace halls as if recognizing them even through the haze of time. Queen Solara's breath caught, her heart thudding so loudly she feared it might give away her shock. Could it truly be? Could her daughter, the one thought lost to the void, truly be standing at the threshold of her palace? The human holding Lyra was tall, strong, and exuded an air of calm confidence. His uniform was unfamiliar, sleek and simple without insignia, yet it spoke of long journeys and survival in hostile environments. He stepped forward carefully, presenting Lyra before the throne without hesitation. The advisors froze, eyes wide with disbelief. Whispers swept through the hall like an invisible current. Who was this human, and why had he brought a royal child into the palace? More importantly, how had she returned after 10 years? Queen Solara's knees weakened. She grasped the edge of the window frame for support, her mind spinning. Memories of Lyra flooded back. The sound of her laughter, the stubborn way she had insisted on climbing palace towers to touch the stars, the nights they had spent in the garden beneath the twin moons, watching the cosmos. And now, here she was, alive, somehow alive. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in 10 years, Solara saw them clearly, the unmistakable eyes of her daughter. They were calm, yet fierce, holding a depth of experience and pain far beyond her years. Lyra's gaze met her mother's, and the connection was immediate, powerful, almost magnetic. The queen felt a mixture of awe, disbelief, and fear. This girl, who had survived unimaginable dangers, was still her child, but she was no longer the little girl she had lost. She had changed. The human set Lyra down gently on the palace floor, his hands steady and careful. "Your Highness," he said with quiet authority, "I have returned her to you. She survived against all odds." His voice carried a weight that commanded attention. "There are dangers. You must listen to her and act quickly." Solara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her royal composure returned, but beneath it lay a storm of emotions she could barely control. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "How did you find her?" How is this possible?" The man bowed slightly. "I am Terran, a human from the outer colonies. I rescued Princess Lyra after she was captured by the Zypherians. They believed she was dead. I risked my life navigating hostile space to bring her back." The court erupted in murmurs, disbelief mixing with fear. Humans were often considered inferior in Artemis Prime's strict hierarchy. Their presence in royal affairs was rare and sometimes unwelcome. Yet none could deny the courage and determination it must have taken for Terran to return the princess. Solara herself felt a reluctant respect for him. Lyra rose slowly to her feet, her movements deliberate, graceful, almost predatory. She studied the throne room, the familiar yet changed surroundings, and then fixed her gaze on her mother. "Mother," she said softly, her voice carrying a strength that made the court fall silent, "I am here. I survived, and I have returned for a reason." Solara stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. The room felt smaller, almost oppressive with tension and emotion. She reached out instinctively, her hands trembling. "Lyra, my daughter, you've returned." The words were choked with emotion. She wanted to hold her, to embrace her, to never let go. Yet she hesitated, noticing the subtle tension in her daughter's stance. This was not the child she had left behind. This was a survivor, someone who had endured horrors she could not imagine. Lyra's eyes softened slightly but remained serious. "Mother, I need your trust," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I cannot explain everything yet, but my return is not just a miracle. There are threats that still linger, and your enemies are closer than you think. I need to act before it's too late." The advisors exchanged worried glances. The Queen's closest counsel had long feared unrest within the palace, and now, with the princess returned and speaking of threats and conspiracies, their unease grew. Some whispered that Terran was a spy, sent by enemies to infiltrate the royal court. Others wondered if Lyra had been altered by her time away, changed into something beyond human. Solara ignored the whispers, focusing on her daughter. She had faced rebellion, alien invaders, and betrayal before, but nothing had prepared her for this. The return of a child thought dead, carrying secrets from beyond the stars, and a human by her side who demanded respect. The weight of the Empire pressed down on her. The safety of her people, her legacy, and the very stability of Artemis Prime rested on her next actions. Lyra took a step closer to the throne, her gaze never leaving her mother's face. "I need your permission to investigate," she said quietly. "There are factions within the palace that have betrayed you, and the Zypherians will not stop until they achieve their goals. Time is short, and every delay risks the Empire's collapse." Solara's mind raced. 10 years of loss, 10 years of ruling without her daughter, and now a confrontation with forces she could not fully see. Yet as she looked at Lyra, she felt a flicker of hope. This child, this survivor, carried strength, courage, and knowledge that could tip the scales. The Queen had always prided herself on her judgment, her ability to read people and situations. And now, faced with the impossible, she found herself trusting her instincts more than ever. Finally, Solara nodded, her voice steady. "You have my permission. But know this, Lyra, the palace is no longer just a home. It is a battlefield. You must tread carefully, and you must trust no one blindly." Lyra inclined her head, understanding the gravity of her mother's words. Terran, standing silently beside her, gave a subtle nod of assurance. He had seen enough to know that Artemis Prime was a place of beauty and danger in equal measure, where loyalty was rare, and betrayal was often hidden behind the most polite smile. Yet he had faith in Lyra's abilities. Together they would face the challenges ahead. As the suns dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the palace floor, a sense of uneasy calm settled over the court. The princess had returned. The human who carried her had risked everything for her survival, and Queen Solara, for the first time in a decade, allowed herself to hope. But the Empire remained dangerous, full of secrets and threats that would not wait. Lyra's journey had only just begun, and the palace, for all its grandeur, was now a stage for the battles yet to come. Lyra could feel the weight of the palace walls pressing in on her as she walked through corridors she had once known as a child. Everything seemed familiar, yet changed. The marble floors still gleamed, reflecting the sunlight streaming through the towering windows, but the air smelled of incense mixed with the cold sterility of technology. Statues of past rulers stood in silent vigilance, their stone eyes seeming to follow her movements. She had returned, but the palace did not welcome her as it once had. It watched, tested, and waited. Terran stayed close, his presence a quiet shield. His human senses had been honed in harsh colonies, navigating planets where survival was never guaranteed. Here, in the heart of an empire that viewed humans with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, he was careful not to draw attention, yet he remained steadfastly by Lyra's side. He understood that the palace itself could be more dangerous than any alien battlefield, and that knowledge made him vigilant. Every whisper, every sideways glance from the courtiers was a potential threat. They entered the private chambers where Queen Selara awaited. The queen's face was pale but composed, her violet eyes reflecting both hope and concern. Lyra approached, and the two women embraced. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The long years of absence, the fear, the pain, all condensed into a brief, powerful moment. Lyra's voice trembled slightly as she whispered, "Mother, I have missed you." Selara held her daughter tightly, fighting tears. "Lyra, my child, you survived. I feared the worst every day." She stepped back to look at her daughter fully, noticing the subtle changes, the strength in her posture, the alertness in her eyes, the calm yet determined energy that surrounded her. She was no longer a child. Lyra had faced dangers that the queen could only imagine, and it showed in every line of her face. "I survived because I had to," Lyra said quietly, "and because someone refused to let me be lost." Her gaze shifted to Terran, who inclined his head modestly. "He risked everything to bring me home." Selara studied the human, suspicion warring with gratitude. He was clearly brave, but humans in her palace were uncommon, often treated as outsiders. Yet something about him spoke of loyalty and courage, qualities that transcended origin. Terran cleared his throat. "Your Highness," he began, his voice steady and respectful, "the journey here was only the beginning. There are still dangers. The Zypherians are not finished, and there are those within the palace who have their own agendas. Princess Lyra has knowledge they fear, and they will act to silence her if we are not careful." The queen's brows knitted together. Betrayal from within the court was not unheard of, but the idea that her daughter had been targeted specifically was unsettling. She gestured for Lyra to sit, and the two women moved to a quiet corner of the chamber, leaving Terran near the doorway, eyes scanning for threats. Lyra began recounting her story, her voice steady but measured. "After I was captured, the Zypherians experimented on me. They were searching for something in my blood, something connected to my royal lineage. I do not know exactly what, but it gave them leverage. They tested my abilities, my endurance, and my mind. It was brutal, Mother. I had to survive every day, learning, adapting, and waiting for an opportunity to escape." Selara listened, her heart aching for her daughter. 10 years of struggle, of pain, and the loneliness of being imprisoned and studied by alien captors. "And Terran found you?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yes," Lyra replied. "I had managed to send subtle signals using what little technology I could scavenge. He tracked them, followed the trail across star systems. It was dangerous. He could have died 100 times before reaching me, and yet here we are." Her gaze met Terran's, gratitude and respect mingling with determination. Selara exhaled slowly, trying to absorb the enormity of the situation. "We must be cautious. If there are traitors in the court, we cannot act rashly. The Empire depends on stability, and your presence, miraculous as it is, will stir unrest if we are not careful." Lyra nodded, her violet eyes unwavering. "I understand, but waiting is not an option. The Zypherians will not stop, and neither will those who sought to use my absence for their own gain. We must uncover the conspirators and neutralize them before they strike again." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. An advisor entered, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, the Council awaits your command," he said, glancing at Lyra with a mixture of curiosity and unease. "They are eager to hear news of the princess." Selara rose, her composure restored. "Bring them in," she said firmly. Lyra followed, Terran close behind. The council chamber was vast, filled with the hum of conversation and quiet tension. Advisors, generals, and diplomats regarded her cautiously, their expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. Some whispered behind cupped hands, questioning whether the princess had truly survived or whether she had been altered by her years away. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I am here," she announced. "I survived, and I have returned not only for myself but for the Empire. There are dangers that you do not yet understand, and threats that will strike if we do not act together." A general rose from his seat, his armor clinking softly. "Your Highness, the Empire is stable, and we have maintained order in your absence. What threats do you speak of? The Zypherians have not approached our borders in years." Lyra's gaze hardened. "They have allies within our walls. Those who sought to use my disappearance for their own gain have not vanished. They watch, they manipulate, and they wait. If we do not uncover them, the Zypherians will succeed without even firing a weapon." Murmurs swept through the council. The notion of internal betrayal, combined with an alien threat, was alarming. Some advisors shifted uneasily in their seats, while others scowled, unwilling to believe that their own colleagues could be compromised. Terran's eyes swept the chamber, noting subtle movements, small signals that suggested some members were hiding more than just doubt. Solara spoke then, her voice calm but commanding. "We will investigate carefully. Princess Lyra will lead the efforts and Terran will assist her. I expect full cooperation from this council. The Empire's stability depends on it." An advisor, older and more experienced than most, raised a hand. "Your Majesty, we must be cautious. The princess has returned after 10 years. We do not know what changes she has undergone. And this human," he gestured subtly toward Terran, "his presence is unusual. How can we be sure of his loyalty?" Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. "You doubt him, after all he has done to bring me home." Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "He is loyal. Not because of obligation, but because of trust earned in the fire of survival. If you cannot trust him, perhaps you should question whether you are fit to serve this empire at all." A silence followed. The advisors exchanged glances, realizing that Lyra's words were not merely a defense of Terran, but a statement of authority. The princess was no longer a passive figure. She had endured years of suffering, emerged stronger, and commanded respect by right of survival and experience. Solara placed a gentle hand on Lyra's arm. "We proceed carefully. We will uncover the traitors without endangering the Empire. Terran, remain vigilant. Lyra, gather your information. The sooner we know who we face, the stronger we will be." The council dispersed, leaving Lyra and Terran alone in the chamber. Outside, the twin suns were setting, casting long shadows through the windows, turning the marble floor to gold and crimson. Lyra moved to the edge of the balcony, gazing at the horizon where distant colonies glimmered like scattered jewels. "So much has changed," she said softly, her voice almost to herself. "And yet the threats remain the same. Greed, betrayal, ambition, it seems some things never change." Terran joined her, his stance protective yet relaxed. "You are not alone," he said quietly. "We will face it together. Whatever the palace holds, whatever dangers are hidden in the shadows, we can confront them." Lyra nodded, absorbing his words. The weight of the empire, of betrayal, and of survival pressed upon her, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at reclaiming her place and ensuring the safety of her people. As night fell over Artemis Prime, the palace lights shimmered, reflecting in the gardens below. Inside, Lyra moved through corridors once more, speaking in hushed tones with Terran, planning and listening, learning the subtle currents of palace intrigue. Every door could conceal danger, every whisper might carry deception. Yet she was ready. She had survived the Zypherians, traversed hostile star systems, and faced impossible odds. The threats within the palace were different, but they would not break her. That night, as the twin moons rose over Artemis Prime, Lyra sat in her old chambers, now hers again. She traced the familiar carvings in the walls, feeling the connection to her past. But the girl she had been was gone. What remained was stronger, wiser, and more determined. And somewhere in the shadows, hidden eyes watched her, measuring, waiting. The games of power had resumed, and she was ready to play. The Empire had seen the return of its lost princess. And now, the real battle, the battle for trust, power, and survival, was beginning. Lyra's story was no longer about survival alone. It was about reclaiming what was hers, uncovering hidden enemies, and proving that even in the face of betrayal and alien threats, humanity, courage, and resilience could prevail. Lyra spent the early hours of the morning walking through the palace halls. accompanied by Terran. The corridors were quiet, yet the silence felt heavy with anticipation. Every shadow, every flicker of movement could be hiding a spy or a traitor. After 10 years of surviving among the stars, among enemies who wanted her dead, she had learned to sense danger, to read subtle signs that others would miss. This palace, which had once felt safe and familiar, now felt like a labyrinth full of secrets, where loyalty and deception were indistinguishable. Terran walked beside her silently, his sharp eyes scanning the hallways and listening to the distant hum of palace machinery. He had warned her that the palace was more dangerous than any battlefield she had faced. Here, enemies could strike without warning, hidden behind polite faces and formal titles. "You must be careful," he said quietly. "Not everyone who bows before you is your friend." "Some are waiting for the right moment to strike." Lyra nodded. She understood. The humans she had trusted outside the palace had proven their loyalty through action, but inside these walls, trust had to be earned through observation and insight. Her violet eyes narrowed as she passed the council chambers, remembering the tension of the previous day. Whispers still echoed in her mind, doubts, fears, and questions from those who had known her since childhood. Some feared her return, some admired her, and some would do anything to seize the power she represented. Her first step was to find allies, those who had remained loyal to her family and to the Empire. She visited the palace guard barracks, walking among soldiers who had defended Artemis Prime for decades. Many recognized her immediately, their expressions softening with relief and respect. Some dropped to a knee instinctively, while others stood silently, waiting for her command. Lyra addressed them with calm authority, explaining that she had returned to ensure the safety of the Empire and to uncover those who had conspired during her absence. The guards listened, their loyalty reaffirmed by her presence and words. Terran remained at her side, offering guidance when needed, though he left the leadership to Lyra. She had the charisma and authority of a true princess, tempered by the resilience of someone who had survived impossible odds. The soldiers began to discuss quietly among themselves, strategies and patrols, sharing information they had gathered about unusual movements or whispers within the palace. After securing the loyalty of the guards, Lyra moved to the palace archives. Here, old records, communications, and reports were stored, some dating back centuries. It was a treasure trove of information, and she needed to understand who had acted while she was gone. With the help of a few trusted archivists, she began to sift through files, searching for patterns that would indicate betrayal. Old letters revealed messages sent to unknown recipients, shipments of resources diverted without explanation, and travel logs that suggested clandestine meetings with outsiders. Each discovery was a small piece of a larger puzzle, and Lyra felt a mixture of anger and resolve. She paused at a file detailing the disappearance of several minor officials during the year she was lost. The records indicated that their absences had been covered up, explained away as voluntary retreats or reassignment. Lyra's jaw tightened. These were deliberate actions to weaken the Empire from within, and perhaps to facilitate her capture. Whoever had orchestrated this had planned carefully, ensuring that suspicion would not fall immediately on them. She realized that time had given her enemies an advantage, but her return now leveled the field. Terran studied her as she worked. "You're thinking too far ahead," he said gently. "You must uncover them step by step. Watch, listen, and act only when you're certain. The wrong move could alert them to your knowledge and put you in danger." Lyra nodded, grateful for his wisdom. He had survived in harsher worlds, navigating threats that she had only recently experienced. His guidance complemented her instinct and authority. Together, they formed a balance of strategy and action. As the day progressed, Lyra received word from one of the palace scouts. A small group of officials had been spotted meeting in a secluded chamber late at night. The meeting had been hidden from council records, and the participants had used coded communication to avoid detection. Lyra's pulse quickened. This was the kind of evidence she needed, the first tangible proof of internal betrayal. She decided to observe the meeting herself, knowing the risk involved. That night, she and Terran moved through the shadowed corridors with the stealth and precision she had learned during her years in captivity. They approached the hidden chamber, listening to the muffled voices inside. The discussion revealed a shocking plan. Several high-ranking officials had conspired with agents from the Zypherians. agreeing to provide information, resources, and access in exchange for promises of power once the alien threat had taken control of the Empire. The realization struck Lyra hard. Betrayal had not only occurred, it had been carefully coordinated to ensure maximum damage. Taryn placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "We have what we need. Now we must decide how to act." Direct confrontation could be dangerous, but waiting could be worse. Lyra's mind raced. She knew the Zypherians were patient and relentless. They would exploit any weakness, any delay to achieve their goals. But she also understood that striking too soon could alert her enemies, giving them time to escape or retaliate. She needed a plan that was precise, decisive, and calculated. The next morning, Lyra summoned her closest allies, the palace guard commander, a few loyal council members, and Taryn. They met in a secure chamber away from prying eyes and ears. Lyra outlined her observations and findings, detailing the conspiracy and the meeting she had witnessed. Her words were firm, authoritative, and unyielding. The allies nodded, some shocked, some fearful, but all understanding the gravity of the situation. Together, they developed a plan. It involved monitoring the conspirators, gathering additional evidence, and preparing to strike at the right moment. Lyra emphasized the importance of secrecy. If even one conspirator discovered her knowledge prematurely, the entire plan could collapse, endangering the palace and the Empire. Over the following days, Lyra continued her investigation. She moved through the palace with a calm and deliberate presence, observing, questioning, and gathering information. She discovered secret passages used to move contraband and documents unnoticed, servants who had been coerced into reporting on the princess's activities, and spies disguised as loyal attendants. Each discovery reinforced her understanding. The palace, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield of hidden agendas and unseen enemies. At the same time, Lyra trained with Taryn, honing her physical abilities. She had survived captivity, but the palace required different skills: agility, stealth, and combat tailored to urban environments. Taryn taught her techniques to move silently, defend herself without raising alarm, and read the body language of those around her. She absorbed each lesson quickly, her mind sharp and focused, her body adapting to the demands. One evening, as she walked through the palace gardens, Lyra reflected on her journey. The stars she had traveled among seemed distant and cold compared to the political complexities of her home. Yet she realized that the skills she had learned during her years away, patience, observation, resilience, were just as valuable here. Survival was not merely about fighting, it was about strategy, intelligence, and understanding the motives of those around her. Taryn joined her in the gardens, offering a rare moment of quiet companionship. "You're ready," he said softly. "You have the knowledge, the strength, and the allies. Now it's a matter of timing. The conspirators will act soon. Are you prepared?" Lyra looked up at the twin moons, their silver light reflecting in her violet eyes. "I am," she said firmly. "I survived the Zypherians. I have faced death countless times. I will not allow betrayal to take hold of my home. The palace is mine, not because of birth alone, but because I am ready to fight for it." That night, Lyra and Taryn set their plan into motion. They monitored the movements of the conspirators, noting their communications, alliances, and hidden activities. They used the palace's own security systems to track suspicious behavior, analyzing patterns that revealed the true extent of the threat. The more Lyra discovered, the more she understood the careful orchestration of betrayal, a network that spanned both human and alien influence. Finally, the moment of confrontation approached. Lyra gathered her allies once more, outlining the precise steps for capturing the conspirators. She emphasized coordination, timing, and decisiveness. Any hesitation could result in failure. Her words carried authority, tempered by experience and confidence. Those around her understood that the princess who had returned was no longer the child they had known. She was a leader, a survivor, and a force to be reckoned with. As the twin moons reached their zenith, casting silver light across the palace grounds, Lyra moved through the corridors with Taryn at her side. Every step was calculated, every decision deliberate. They approached the location where the conspirators were meeting once more, ready to expose their actions to the Empire. The time for observation was over. The time for action had come. Lyra's heart beat steadily, not with fear but with determination. She had faced unimaginable odds and emerged stronger. The palace, with its hidden threats and treacheries, was no different. Tonight she would confront the shadows of betrayal, reclaim her authority, and ensure that Artemis Prime remained safe from both internal and external enemies. The battle for the Empire's future was about to begin, and Lyra was ready to face it head-on. The palace was quiet, but every corner seemed alive with tension. Lyra moved through the corridors with Terran at her side, her violet eyes sharp and alert. The conspirators she had uncovered were gathering for what they believed would be a decisive moment. They did not know she was already watching, that the Empire's lost princess had returned stronger and wiser, ready to confront betrayal and reclaim her place. Lyra's mind raced as she reviewed her plan. She had spent days gathering evidence, studying their movements, and ensuring that every ally was in position. The palace guards she had secured were hidden in key locations, ready to respond at her signal. Terran had set up a system of surveillance, using palace technology and subtle observation to track even the smallest movements. Tonight, patience would meet precision, and the conspirators would have no escape. They reached the chamber where the conspirators were meeting. Lyra paused at the edge of the corridor, listening to the muffled voices inside. Each word confirmed her suspicions. The officials had coordinated with Zypherian agents, discussing shipments, secret alliances, and plans to manipulate the Empire from within. Their confidence was remarkable, considering that their target, the princess herself, was right outside the door. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. "It ends tonight." The words echoed through the hall, startling the conspirators. They turned, eyes wide with shock and fear, recognizing the girl they had written off as dead. The room fell silent. Lyra's presence was a statement in itself. She had survived, returned, and held the power to challenge them all. One of the leading conspirators, a council member with a reputation for cunning, sneered. "You, a child who vanished 10 years ago, do you think you can intimidate us?" Lyra's gaze did not waver. "I am no longer the child you knew," she replied, her voice steady and strong. "I have seen worlds beyond your understanding, faced enemies you cannot imagine, and survived. You have conspired against your own empire, and now you will answer for it." Terran moved beside her, placing a protective hand near her shoulder, a silent reminder of his presence. The conspirators glanced nervously at him, realizing that this human was more than an observer. He had aided the princess in ways they could not comprehend, and his loyalty was undeniable. The balance of power had shifted in an instant. Lyra continued, stepping closer to the conspirators. "Your alliances with the Zypherians will not save you. I have evidence of every meeting, every secret communication, every betrayal. You underestimated me. You underestimated what I have become." Her words resonated through the chamber, leaving no room for doubt. The conspirators exchanged nervous glances, recognizing the gravity of their situation. The palace guards, previously hidden, began to emerge from their positions, surrounding the room and cutting off all escape routes. The conspirators' confidence faltered as they realized that their carefully laid plans had been anticipated. Lyra's strategy was flawless. They were trapped, exposed, and vulnerable. One conspirator, desperate, lunged toward Lyra with a hidden dagger. Terran reacted instantly, moving with the precision of someone who had survived countless battles. He intercepted the attack, disarming the conspirator and pinning him to the ground. The others froze, fear overtaking their initial defiance. Lyra did not raise her voice, did not need to. The control she exerted through presence and authority was enough to command obedience. "Enough," she said firmly. "You will be taken to the council chamber where your actions will be reviewed and justice will be served. Any resistance will be met with immediate consequences." The conspirators, realizing their options had vanished, lowered their heads in reluctant submission. They understood that their schemes had failed, and the girl they had thought dead was now their master. Queen Celera arrived shortly afterward, escorted by trusted advisors. She entered the chamber, her presence commanding attention. Her eyes met Lyra's, and a silent exchange passed between them, relief, pride, and awe at the courage and determination her daughter had shown. "Lyra," the queen said softly, "you have returned not only as my child, but as the protector of this empire. You have proven yourself beyond measure." Lyra inclined her head, acknowledging her mother's words but keeping her focus on the task at hand. The conspirators were now under the control of loyal guards, their fates determined by the evidence Lyra had collected. It was not revenge she sought, but justice, a restoration of order and the preservation of the empire she had been born to protect. The council chamber was soon filled with witnesses as the conspirators were brought forward. Each was presented with the records of their communications, the hidden documents, and the testimonies of those who had remained loyal. Lyra spoke clearly, detailing their actions and the risks they had imposed on the empire. Her voice carried authority, tempered by the experience of someone who had survived years of adversity. The conspirators attempted to deny their involvement, but the evidence was irrefutable. Their secret alliances with the Xipherians, their manipulations within the palace, and their plans to destabilize the empire were exposed for all to see. The court listened in stunned silence, realizing the depth of betrayal that had taken place during the princess's absence. Queen Celara took her daughter's hand, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and relief. "The empire has been tested," she said, "and it has endured. But it is through courage, loyalty, and wisdom that we survive. Lyra, you have brought justice and honor back to these halls." Terran stood nearby, watching the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. He had witnessed Lyra's growth, her ability to lead and inspire, and her unwavering commitment to the empire. He knew that her return was not just a personal triumph, but a turning point for Artemis Prime. The conspirators' defeat was a signal to all. Loyalty, courage, and resilience were forces that could not be ignored. As the conspirators were escorted from the chamber, the court erupted in murmurs of admiration and relief. The people of the empire, though distant, would soon hear of the princess who had returned from the stars, exposed betrayal, and reclaimed her rightful place. Lyra had become more than a symbol of hope. She was now a living example of determination, intelligence, and strength. In the following days, Lyra worked closely with Queen Celara and Terran to restore stability to the palace and the empire. Security measures were strengthened, communication channels were monitored, and loyal officials were placed in key positions. Lyra's experience and insight allowed her to anticipate potential threats and address them before they could take root. Her leadership style was firm but fair, commanding respect without relying on fear. She also took time to reconnect with the palace staff and citizens who had known her before her disappearance. Some were cautious, still wary of the changes she had undergone, while others welcomed her with open arms, recognizing the strength and wisdom she now possessed. Lyra listened to their concerns, offered guidance, and shared her vision for the future of Artemis Prime. Even as order was restored, Lyra remained vigilant. The Xipherians had been forced to retreat, but their presence in the galaxy was far from gone. She knew that future threats could arise at any moment, both from alien forces and from human ambition. Her years of survival had taught her that vigilance was essential, and she was determined to ensure that the Empire would never be caught unprepared again. Terran continued to serve as her trusted ally and advisor, offering perspectives drawn from his experiences beyond the Empire. Together, they trained palace guards, developed strategies to counter external threats, and strengthened alliances with neighboring colonies. Lyra's leadership inspired confidence, and her reputation as a capable and courageous ruler began to spread across Artemis Prime and beyond. As the weeks passed, the palace began to feel alive again, no longer shadowed by fear or uncertainty. Lyra spent time with her mother, rebuilding the bond that had been tested by years of separation. They shared stories, memories, and plans for the future. The queen marveled at the resilience and growth of her daughter, realizing that Lyra's absence had forged a strength that was now evident in every decision she made. One evening, Lyra stood on the balcony overlooking the city as the twin moons rose high above Artemis Prime. The glow of the palace lights reflected in the gardens below, and the city beyond shimmered like a field of stars. Terran joined her quietly, standing at her side as she gazed into the horizon. "The Empire is safe," he said softly, "at least for now. But threats will always exist." Lyra nodded, her violet eyes reflecting determination. "Yes, but we are stronger now. We have learned, we have survived, and we will continue to protect our people. Betrayal and danger will come, but we will face it together. The Empire will endure because we refuse to let it fall." In the months that followed, Lyra worked tirelessly to strengthen Artemis Prime, addressing weaknesses, fortifying defenses, and nurturing alliances. The palace became a center of vigilance and innovation. blending tradition with the knowledge and skills Lyra had gained during her time beyond the stars. Her leadership style inspired loyalty and admiration, uniting humans and aliens alike under a shared vision of resilience and prosperity. Through her actions, Lyra proved that survival was not enough. It was the ability to lead, to make difficult decisions, and to inspire others that defined true strength. Her return was not only a personal triumph, but a testament to the enduring spirit of Artemis Prime. The Empire had faced loss, betrayal, and alien threats, but it had emerged stronger, guided by a princess who had returned from the void with courage, wisdom, and determination. As the twin suns rose once more over Artemis Prime, Lyra stood at the palace balcony with her mother and Terran. The city below thrived, the gardens bloomed, and the people went about their lives with renewed hope. The conspirators had been removed, justice had been served, and the Empire was secure. Lyra's journey had come full circle, from a lost child presumed dead to a leader who had reclaimed her throne, her family, and the trust of her people. She looked out at the horizon, knowing that challenges would continue to arise, but confident in her ability to face them. Artemis Prime had witnessed the return of its lost princess, and with her leadership, the Empire would endure for generations to come. Lyra's story was a testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. A story that would be remembered and celebrated as a symbol of hope, strength, and the triumph of humanity and loyalty over betrayal and darkness.